Hola amigos, bienvenido a El Paso, está muy frío, soy Aslan Hajavandi con Irish O'Fell, that's all the Spanish I have. We are out front of the Media Hotel here in El Paso, Texas. He's Irish O'Fell, I'm Aslan Hajavandi. Just got wrapped up with the coordinator interviews, very busy day of news, Ira, but obviously we were here on the ground in El Paso and got to speak to both Harlan Barnett and Kendall Briles. A couple questions about the football game from the local media, but us more kind of big picture stuff, and you have some stories up there, or at least one story about what Kendall and Harlan talked about when it comes to the big picture of Florida State. I mean, what caught your ear about what they said? I mean, just to me, it was kind of Harlan's reaction when I asked him about kind of what he learned from his time in Tallahassee.
Yeah, I did write about it, but you probably want to watch the videos too. We included those in the story, and then you can watch them on YouTube or at Warchant or on Facebook. But you know, it was Harlan's reaction to your question, and also to Sean's question about kind of how he's handling this experience. The smiles he gave, you know, just it was kind of these kind of agonizing smiles, you know, kind of like, yeah, we all know what happened, and I'm not going to go too into detail, but he did open up some, and I thought a little bit more than I expected. And he said, you know, looking into, you asked him what he learned from the experience at Florida State, and he said that, you know, you just need to know more about the situation, everything you're going to deal with, everybody you're going to deal with. And that kind of dovetailed with what we had been hearing really over the last 2 years, but especially this past season when they switched to the 3-4 defense, something that Harlan Barnett had never run before. You know, you started hearing things behind the scenes that he wasn't necessarily very comfortable with that defensive scheme. They kind of went back and forth with no success. Really, over these last 2 years, this defense has not gotten any better. Individual players haven't gotten any better. And so it's been a frustrating 2 years. He still has another year on his contract, but he's been told he's not coming back. He knew that, obviously, under Mike Norvell. So it was interesting to watch his reactions, hear him talk about it for the first time. This was really his first chance to kind of talk in the post-Willie Taggart era. And then, you know, Kendall Briles also talked, and I thought he had, you know, had some things he said before about, you know, the limitations on this team with the offensive line and some of the other positions, quarterback play. So I thought it was a pretty enlightening press conference, really more of a postscript to 2019 in the Willie Taggart era than it was looking ahead to the Sun Bowl.
In this day and age of multiple cameras, multiple outlets, multiple entities covering, I mean, that's about as, I don't know, revealing, or that's about as honest of an answer I think you're going to get from guys on the record, it felt like.
Yeah, no, totally. And you know, they want to be professional. It's a tough situation because for a guy like Harlan Barnett, he's going to keep working. And nobody wants to hire somebody who just trashed his former employer. It's a bad look. A little pro tip, if you go on interviews for jobs, I've interviewed a lot of people through the years. If somebody comes in for a job interview and all they do is bitch about their former employer, it's a bad sign. It might mean more about you than it does about the person you work for. So he's definitely taking the high road, not just because it's a smart thing professionally, but also I think, you know, he's a good guy, and I think he doesn't want to leave on bad terms. But you could read between the lines that it was a tough situation. And, you know, I think from a personnel standpoint, but I think more, it seemed like he was talking more about big picture, working for Willie Taggart and kind of the entire staff. And, you know, it's not a surprise that Odell Haggins is the only defensive coach who's going to be back in 2020. The rest of the staff will be leaving as well. So it's kind of a new beginning, but, you know, they also talked about how the players have handled it, and we'll see how they play on Tuesday. But he and Kendall both said that the practices have been pretty good. Kendall had some really good things to say about Tamari and Terry. So, you know, again, we'll have to see how they play, but they were complimentary how the players have handled all this adversity and go through practices with coaches that they know will be out of a job pretty soon.
Right. And in what we talked to Kendall about, just kind of the fact that Mike Norvell had been interviewing players that aren't going to be here next year to kind of get their thoughts on things, and to hear whether or not Kendall had that conversation, and the fact that he said he did. I mean, I just think he's another guy that he offered his takes, and I think is the quote he gave, that these guys are going to be honest about what they experienced. And I think, again, the way they handled the questions today kind of lets you know they obviously they were good soldiers, but probably weren't the happiest with the orders they were receiving, or at least the way the environment had been around them. But I don't quite share their enthusiasm, or rather optimism that they were going to be ready to handle the game. But, you know, stranger things have happened in Arizona State. I guess that's the thing that maybe we haven't talked about enough, is that Arizona State's dealing with their own amount of turnaround and turnover in terms of, I mean, heck, you want to talk about players, at least Florida State's kind of gone a few weeks without Marvin Wilson. They're going to be without their leading receiver and leading running back.
Yeah, both a 1,000-yard rusher and a 1,000-yard receiver. And the receiver's big time. He had 65 catches, 8 touchdowns, you know, really big part of their offense. And he's out, and the running back is also they're declaring for the NFL draft, like Cam Akers for Florida State. And also their defensive coordinator is out, so they've got an assistant coach taking over as defensive coordinator, although they have Marvin Lewis, who probably is helping out as well as a special assistant to Herm Edwards. So, but yeah, that's the thing with these bowl games in general. We watch them, every day we watch these different bowl games, and it's so much of it is who wants to be there, and then which team is doing the best job of overcoming the obstacles they did have. I thought, and Kendall, really this whole year that we've got to interview him, he's always been pretty transparent, I think, and he's been, critical sometimes of players, and whether you like that or not, that's kind of has been his approach. And today, we asked him about the plan without Cam Akers, and he started off the bat with, look, Deontay Sheffield is not Cam Akers. Deontay knows that. And so I thought that was pretty fun. He also talked about, and James Blackman and the situation with the quarterbacks. I thought, you dominated the press conference, Aslan. Another good question. You asked him what Kendall learned from that experience with the quarterbacks, and it sounded like maybe he kind of felt maybe they didn't handle that as well as they could have. You brought in a graduate transfer in Alex Hornibrook, never settled in on one guy. Nobody really felt like they were the leader of the team, and it sounded like he thought he learned from that experience as well.
Right. Also, you did mention that maybe have some things up front that weren't perfect,
Yeah.
but then again, nobody else does.
He said they weren't perfect up front of the offensive line. That was pretty much the first thing he said, I think, breaking down the team. So, but I never get mad at coaches when they do that. And sometimes fans do, and other people in the media will say, oh, you're throwing the players under the bus. Look, we all watch the games. We all see what we see. So it's not a big shock that Florida State's offensive line is not perfect.
But hey, there's help on the way, right? A graduate transfer from Florida International University. Was it Devontae or Deontay?
I think it's Devontay Taylor.
Devontay Taylor.
Like Levante Taylor, but with a D, yeah.
So he's transferring in from FIU as a grad transfer. We're bracing for, which means he would immediately be eligible. I looked him up on Pro Football Focus last night in terms of his overall grading. He looked to be hovering there in the high 60s, low 70s, which
would be an improvement.
It is. I mean, it is. And I'm not really trying to downgrade the kid at all. And also, I think his highest ranked or graded out game was actually against Miami, which I'm assuming is probably the toughest game on FIU's schedule, and it was the best game they played. So, tall kid from, I think he's originally from South Florida, if I'm not mistaken.
Tampa area.
Okay, all right, that's right. Yeah, it's my neck of the woods. A guy that obviously had interest in Florida State earlier in his career, but maybe wasn't at that caliber. And this is how things can work with the grad transfer market, right? Go somewhere for 3 years, play pretty good, get your degree early, and then you can step up in competition.
Yeah, and he actually was coming out of high school. Rivals had him in the database as a 2-star defensive end. So he's a long, athletic guy. I think he was like 6'4", 6'5", 250. Now he's about 305 pounds. So he's obviously put on size, moved to offensive tackle. He started this entire season at right tackle. He's played in just about every game the last 2 years for FIU. Again, I'm guessing probably similar to Ryan Roberts, but maybe a little bit more athletic. You're not bringing in a guy who's been a starter at Clemson or Alabama or something like that. But when it comes to getting a guy that can play right away, can play in 2020, can come to spring practice. He'll be here in January. He'll be in spring practice, get all those reps with the new offensive line coach, new offensive line. It's giving you offensive tackle was the biggest position of need on this team. You get him, and then also Jashun Corbin, the running back from Texas A&M, also transferred in. It's been a pretty big day for Florida State.
Yeah, I mean, I remember watching him last year at Texas A&M, and he was quite the talent. He was committed to Jimbo Fisher in Florida State for a long time, then followed Jimbo to College Station. I think he said he's coming home, right?
Yeah, when I saw him in high school when he committed to Florida State, he was a 3-star originally, and I kind of was like, okay, Jimbo reaching a little bit, 3-star. But then you start watching his film, and it's like, okay, this kid can play. He goes to Texas A&M with Jimbo, and I thought he had a great freshman year. He wasn't the starter. He had about 330, 340 yards. Ran so hard. His return guy, he had some big returns that season, and then was a starter early this season before tearing his hamstring. They've recruited really well at running back, so it's not shocking that he would leave. But I think it's a big get for Florida State, especially with what's happening at running back and the uncertainty about, Grant and Kalen Laybourne being suspended late in the season. So it's a huge pickup. We don't know. I think he's going to have to petition to be eligible to play this season, even though he redshirted last season. You can't just transfer and play right away. But so he may have to petition for a waiver. But even if he can't, he's a guy that would still have 3 years to play going forward.
And not for nothing, it's compliments of Mike Norvell for identifying his roster deficiencies and trying to get them fixed as soon as possible because, I mean, let's be honest, 2018 spring season, Florida State knew they were tenuous at offensive line. They didn't go in the JUCO market. Transfer market was obviously not as robust as it is now, but the fact that Mike Norvell's identified the fact that they don't have depth at running back, they need help at offensive tackle. He's went and got 2 guys, and Corbin, we've seen with our own eyes, is a guy that can do it. And then with Taylor down at FIU, maybe a guy that can actually get you some good reps and some good production. So that's a great thing too. And then also, I guess, compliment to Mike Norvell and his vision, pulling the guy from the NFL to be his chief of staff. I don't know what we used to call that, director of ops. Some schools call. I like chief of staff. I think that sounds a little bit better. Body man, I think that some guys call it. But Bruce Warwick, I think from with the LA Rams.
Yeah, that's a pretty big time hire. I mean, again, you're talking about bringing in people from not just guys that came up underneath you. And again, not to compare everything to the Taggart era, but one of the things we were concerned about early and played out was that a lot of the guys on that staff had come up under Willie and had spent their whole careers at this level under Willie Taggart. The majority of these guys are coming from different places. He did bring in some guys from Memphis, Adam Fuller and a couple others, but bringing in guys with NFL experience is big because not only because of the experiences they've had, and obviously the Rams are a great organization, but also the guys that have been exposed to different things. A lot of these coaches have coached for different, Fuller coached at Marshall under Doc Holliday. A lot of these guys have been exposed to Dillingham, spent a year with Gus Malzahn. I mean, these guys have been exposed to different things. It just seems like one positive thing after another. And again, you don't want to get too ahead of yourself. No. But this looks completely different from the first 2 months. This first month under Mike Norvell looks very different for the first 6 months under Willie Taggart.
People probably won't believe this, but at one point my hair actually looked great today. So let's end this while I can maybe salvage it. We're going to have a great steak dinner at Cattleman's Steak Ranch someplace. I don't know. Suppose like 2-pound T-bone steak.
Yeah, the cowboy steak is 2 pounds. Yeah. The cowgirl steak is 1.5 pounds. I think we may, we'll see whether or not we're ready.
Godspeed, Ira. We're going to shoot for the moon. Maybe we'll land amongst the stars or something like that. Plenty going over on warchant.com. Yes. Ira's got the story in the write-up from the press conference, and Michael's got your take on what the transfer can mean, and then Jashun Corbin also have the story about that as well.
And Michael's also down at the Under Armour Media Day today, so he's got plenty of coverage on the recruits coming in for 2020, and several of them are interested in Florida State, and that's also at warchant.com.
Use the promo code WARCHANT30, gets you 30 free days of access to the Ultimate Seminole Sports Source. We are in El Paso. He's Ira Schoffel. I'm Aslan Giovanni. Thanks for watching.